The clitoris is not just this P-shaped button at the top, it in fact extends internally as well. Hey, this is Lisa Mangaldas. I'm a sex educator and I'm here on Dubara to answer questions about sex with a focus on women and pleasure. What is sex? Most of us inherit a very rigidly heteronormative, penetration-centric definition of sex. Society will make us think that sex is penis and vagina penetration. However, sex really is far more expansive than that. Human sexual activity can involve any number of ways that we choose to explore and experience our sexuality. And some people's sexual experiences may never even involve that combination of organs, right? And yet all of it is valid and rich and joyful. There is no ideal form of sex or, right form of sex with everything else being lesser than. It's not like that. Oral sex is sex. Masturbation, solo sex is sex. Anal sex, using your fingers, outer course, moving beyond just the genitals in your quest for sexual pleasure. There's so much out there. There's so much potential for pleasure. We also have to stop thinking of sex as purely reproductive, right? That's how we learn about it in school, but many people have sex with no intention of ever having babies. And I think it's important to expand our views because we can have a far more imaginative and compassionate and inclusive framework for how we think about sex. Is sexual pleasure important for women? Sexual pleasure can be important for anyone of any gender. It does not discriminate. It is so unfortunate, though, that society can make it seem like women are somehow only to be reluctant participants in sex, as if it is unwomanly to want or desire or be curious about sex. We get so much judgment and shame for expressing our autonomy or sexuality as women, and it can be hard not to internalize that, right? We get the messaging that good girls shouldn't want sex, that sex is only a duty that a wife must reluctantly partake in for their husband. But I think it's so important that we reject that gendered conditioning, because really, no matter our gender, we should be able to choose whether or not we're interested in sex. And it doesn't say anything about our character either way. Asexuality is also valid. Some people of any gender may not be driven by sex, and that's fine. On the other hand, people of any and all genders may be very interested in sex, including women. And so sexual pleasure really ought to be seen in a far more democratic way. I never got pleasure from sex. It just hurts me. I'm not even interested in it, not able to figure out what's wrong. Sex isn't supposed to hurt. Unfortunately, women receive this sort of conditioning that makes us think that pain is just par for the course during sex, but it isn't supposed to be. Sex doesn't even have to be painful the first time. And I think it's really important that we recognize that. Pain should not be normalized in this way because it is definitely preventable. Spending enough time on the acts traditionally considered foreplay so that you're relaxed and aroused before attempting penetration. You also can use lube. Lube is the unsung hero of more comfortable, more fun sex for everybody. And I highly, highly recommend using it because it is such a simple way to make sex feel better. That said, there are also some slightly more complicated issues that can cause pain during sex, such as vaginismus and vulvodynia, and if any sort of contact or penetration is extremely painful to the point of even feeling impossible, such as even when you touch yourself or use a tampon, it is worth seeing a gynecologist because there are solutions for this as well. I do think, though, that there is no pressure to have sex. You mentioned that you're not interested in it. That's totally fine. Not everybody is interested in sex, and it's important for you to be able to get to know yourself and understand how you feel about sex. And if it's not something you're driven by, that is totally fine as well. Just because you're not interested in sex or because your sexual experiences thus far haven't felt pleasurable does not mean there's something wrong with you. Please don't feel that way. Get to know yourself, get to know your body. There's no hurry to figure things out. The learnings can be ongoing and infinite. As a teenager, why do we feel bad after masturbation? So a lot of us inherit a lot of shame around masturbation. It can be hard not to believe, especially as a young person, because that's what everybody is seemingly saying, right? The adults around you, religious leaders, whoever it is. I don't know, you've probably internalized the messaging that masturbation is shameful and wrong and bad. And that is perhaps part of the reason why you might feel bad or guilty after masturbating. But it is good to know that masturbation is actually a perfectly normal and healthy behavior. It is a self-soothing behavior. It has several health benefits such as improved sleep, improved mood, helping you understand your own body and sexuality. It is also the safest way of experiencing sexual pleasure, minus the risks of infection or pregnancy or even rejection. So it actually has several benefits. So we've got to unlearn that conditioning and remind ourselves that actually masturbation is absolutely fine. Another thing people sometimes feel guilty about is masturbating if they're in a relationship. I think it's again important to recognize that you are perfectly entitled to your own relationship with your body and sexuality. Masturbation is not cheating. Is it okay to masturbate every day? How much masturbation is too much masturbation? You get to decide. There is no single one-size-fits-all answer for this. Some people may enjoy masturbating every day, some people once a week, once a month, once a year, not at all. And there is no right or wrong amount. It really is up to you to determine what feels good for you. And I think it's just important to keep in mind that, as long as it's not getting in the way of any activities like school or work or your family obligations, and as long as you're not injuring yourself, there is no negative impact. I mean, I get questions like, can masturbation cause acne? Can masturbation cause hair fall? Can masturbation make my penis smaller? Will masturbation reduce pleasure during sexual activity? And the answer to all of that is no. Masturbation is not going to cause any of that. Where exactly shall I lick her so that she feels extreme pleasure? Exact point, please. Well, I am glad that you want to please your partner, and I just want to start by saying the best thing to do is to ask her, because everybody's pleasure preferences can vary. And so really what I'm going to tell you is only some general tips and indication of the anatomy, but ultimately you have got to talk to your partner. Nonetheless, here is a model of the vulva, and this is the clitoris, which is, for many vulva owners, the most central aspect of pleasure. The clitoris is not just this P-shaped button at the top, it in fact extends internally as well. And these parts straddle the vaginal canal. So often stimulation of the external clitoris combined with vaginal stimulation can feel amazing, because the internal stimulation provides stimulation to the internal parts of the clitoris as well. However, if you want to just start easy, focusing on the external clitoris is likely to be extremely pleasurable. It is the most reliable route to orgasm for most vulva owners. But all of that said, you have got to talk to your partner, because some people prefer penetration, some people might prefer something totally different like breast play, or kissing her ears or back or neck. There's so much pleasure even beyond the genitals. So you have got to talk to your partner. But do remember the clitoris. I'm a female, 20 years old. How do I attain orgasm through penetration? That is a great question. A lot of women find penetrative sex unsatisfying because, unfortunately, penetration does not always result in external clitoral stimulation, which, as I just said, is the far more reliable route to orgasm for most people with vulvas. So once you're empowered with that knowledge that perhaps you do require some clitoral stimulation in order to achieve orgasm, you can incorporate that into penetration by discovering positions that allow for sufficient friction against your external clitoris alongside penetration. Often the woman on top position is particularly effective for this because it gives you more control over your movements, and you can perhaps ensure some pleasurable rubbing against your partner's lower belly while also enjoying penetration. Similarly, another position that you can also try is the coital alignment technique, which involves the sort of rubbing together of the bodies as opposed to thrusting. Again, this lends itself to clitoral stimulation alongside penetration. But these are only, two little suggestions. You can really explore what feels good for you. You can even incorporate a toy into partnered sex. Vibrators are incredibly effective at providing clitoral stimulation, and there is absolutely no harm in using one while enjoying penetration. I hope you liked this video. If you did, you should check out the Sex Education You Should Have Gotten series, where Seema Anand answers more questions about sexual wellness. Thanks so much for watching.